Alright everyone, thus proving that yes, I am still alive. No, my foot wound didn't kill me off or anything. It's time for some videos today. First and foremost, let me say this. I am in a little bit of pain, but it is improving. Some people are trying to give me like medical advice on Twitter. Go to a doctor, get stitches and stuff. I'm like, the average person does not get wound infection and have their foot fall off because they've got a cut. Even if it's a deeper cut, it stopped bleeding, the swelling's going down, it doesn't hurt nearly as much as yesterday. I remain optimistic about my chances of survival, so don't worry too much. Like, I know the signs of infection, so don't worry. But it's time to talk about the Unmasking Antifa Act, because it's fairly important. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say something that will cause some people to do like a boomer meme or something. I oppose this act, and I'll tell you why, and there's two reasons. Number one, it would be much more easy to just expand stand your ground nationwide. Like in some states you have like this duty to retreat bullshit. That should be overruled at the federal level. It's unconstitutional. It defies the Second Amendment. People should have a right to defend themselves in the public space. If they're being attacked or others are being attacked by a group of people, whether they're wearing masks or not, you have a fundamental human right to defend yourself, your property, others in their property. It's one of the goals, one of the primary things that a government is made for is to prevent victimization. Well, if the government's unwilling or unable situationally to do that, then the private citizens have absolutely a civil right to do so. So the act is simply unnecessary. The fact that someone puts a mask on should not be seen as a particularly exacerbating factor. If you allow people to properly fight back, you have a mob of people throwing piss bottles and punches, let people fall in and unmask them themselves, well, problem solved. But simply wearing a mask while you happen to be protesting, if you try to ban that, I think the First Amendment is going to come into play. SCOTUS will eventually hear the case and they'll shoot it down. They'll find it unconstitutional. When does your right to protest magically go away based on your attire? That's like saying, well, you're wearing a shirt that has unkind messages about police on it, so your right to protest is rescinded until you take it off. What about someone who's wearing religious garb that obscures the face? Fundamentally, a person, for instance, has a right to wear a burqa within the United States. Think what you will, of course, about Islam. I happen not to like it as an ideology, but you do have a right to wear one. Well, simply because of your religious stricture telling you have to wear one doesn't mean that you don't have the same First Amendment right to protest. The problem is pragmatic, though. It's not moral. The right wing always will talk about this. I guarantee. A lot of people will say, well, Sticks, you're wrong on this one, and they'll debate me on a moral component. They'll say, well, it's just totally, Antifa's violent, they're terrorists, they're horrible people. Okay, granted, yes, they are. SCOTUS will throw it out, though. It doesn't matter what the court's composition, by the way, is. It'd probably be a 9-0 decision in favor of the right of people to wear masks at a protest, until they get violent. In which case, the Unmasking Antifa Act doesn't have any real purpose. The concept is force people to disclose their identities, Charlottesville style, when they're actually protesting. Well, the government can't do that. The government can't force you to disclose your identity simply because you're protesting. Absolutely not. It violates the First Amendment. So it'll be toothless. It'll get shot down. Better would be for Congress to assert that the states have to allow stand your ground. In all cases. Castle Doctrine. In all cases. The right of self-defense is ultimate. That is, the Second Amendment is fairly clear. People have a right to keep and bear arms. Why do they have them? To defend themselves and their nation and their property and to secure all their other liberties. That's the only point of it. So that's what I would say. It's simply so much easier to do that. The other part is this. Can't you see a time in which this would be used to abuse people who aren't part of Antifa? Like, this is aimed at, specifically this one group. Well, there are other times that people get together and might obscure their faces. What if a bunch of people are protesting with Guy Fawkes masks? A bunch of fucking Kekistanis are protesting Scientology. Are you going to throw them in jail for 15 years? Because one of them threw a rock, so now, well, they're all part of a mob, they're all wearing masks, so now this person that literally was just standing there, he's going to prison for 15 years. Yeah, I think that that's definitely a violation of some human rights right there, and I don't think that any court will uphold it. The Republicans have the right motive, but the wrong idea entirely. And this is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Stomping out some violent anarchists is a wonderful thing. Let people that are actually physically there do that. Law enforcement half the time is told to stand down. Well, let's say that they are wearing a mask. You've got this act saying it's illegal to do that. Well, you still have to catch them and unmask them in order to charge them. Well, the people that are around in most states, they're still not allowed to tangle with the so-called protesters and the rioters. They're not allowed to. They have to stand back. They have a duty to retreat because, well, there's another street open, so you can't keep them away from, destroying your public property and sawing this tree down and throwing rocks through windows. You can't get involved. Only law enforcement can. It's a double standard, and it's also literally tyranny. Tyranny is that which is allowed to the government, disallowed to the people. So people can't defend their communities ably in most urban centers, which is where Antifa tends to operate, and within blue states, where you have a lot of urban centers where Antifa tends to operate. They're not staging a riot in some one-horse town out in Wyoming. They're not staging a riot here in hippie-trippy small-town America. No, they'll go to New York City or Chicago or something, where people are already half disarmed anyway. Therein lies your problem. That's why they operate with impunity and act the way they do, because they know that no one's going to challenge them until the riot cops show up. They'll throw some shit bottles, the cops will charge, they'll retreat. This happens a few times and then they scatter. And they do potentially large amounts of property damage and harm people in the meantime. This act won't help that. That is that it's a false cure for a real problem. Sometimes Congress gives you a cure for a problem that's not legitimate or doesn't exist. This time they're trying to give you a snake oil cure. I totally oppose it. No, I want nationwide standing ground. I want like Vermont's duty to retreat law overruled at the federal level to bring it in line with the U.S. Constitution. And by the way, the Vermont Constitution, which they've been ignoring for decades. That's what we need. We also need a repeal of all existing gun control. We need to assert that people have the right to carry firearms, concealed or openly. It should be nationwide reciprocal carry everywhere, no exceptions. People who are not guilty of any violent crime, simple misdemeanors or a white-collar felony, they shouldn't have their firearm rights taken away because they're not lunatics under, any constitutional definition. People need to be more armed and more able to defend themselves. We can take care of it. Look, there's no reason to even call law enforcement. Let the local shop owners take care of it. 3 or 4 dudes with shotguns can take out a whole line of Antifa terrorists. And they are terrorists. They've been declared so by multiple states. Insofar, therefore, as they gather together and start throwing rocks, they are engaged in active terrorism on U.S. soil. So let the local people take care of it. Let's revert to the Wild West. There's the crime rate in the Wild West per capita was actually lower than it is now. Most people think it was like, oh, there's bandits everywhere. No. No. Back then, because people could gun you down if you acted up, back when everyone carried guns outside of some of the eastern cities, crime rate was way lower out west. It's a little known thing. Let's go back to everyone carrying 6-shooters around. I guarantee you would have a more polite society. Good fences make good neighbors. Leave people's property alone. Now, if they're just in the middle of a public park or something, trashing, the trash bins, Antifa likes trash because they see it as kindred, so they like to go around and kick like trash cans and rummage around in it and I guess smoke half-smoked cigarette butts and eat like half-eaten fucking McDonald's food that they find because none of them have jobs. Okay, they like to do that sort of stuff. Well, if they're contained and they're not throwing rocks at people, I don't fucking care. It doesn't matter whether they have a mask on at the time. I can throw a mask on and go protest. I have that right. It's covered under the First Amendment in the most explicit sense because the government is not enabled. The First Amendment specifically enumerates the fact that the government can't prevent any form of peaceable protest. And if it's no longer peaceable, it no longer matters if they're masked. You still have to go and get them. So yeah, just stand your ground nationwide. Let people defend themselves and their communities. Antifa will be a thing of the past. Because pretty soon there won't be any living Antifa members that aren't behind bars because they'll all get captured or injured or killed. There you go. That's about all. Peace out.